I'm really excited to have Rob here. You've heard a lot of conversation about innovation as we've walked through things here. And Rob has actually, in preparing for this keynote, interviewed well over 20 CEOs on these very topics that we're talking about. And so what Rob's going to do is deliver a keynote that's really kind of an executive level overview of what innovation really means and why it's so important and so forth. And just to give a little bit of background on Rob, Rob's a speaking author and consulting CEO. He advises middle market chief executives like many of you to navigate critical passages. He's also a veteran CEO. He has 23 years of operating experience. He's taught entrepreneurship to executive MBAs at St. Mary's College. He's authored a book called "To Feel the Deal" or "The Feel of the Deal," excuse me. How I Built My Business Through Acquisitions. He serves as a board member on the Association for Corporate Growth, as also a director of the Alliance of Chief Executives. So Rob spends his life basically interacting with people like all of you. So I think he's going to have a lot of really interesting things to say. And again, when we conclude Rob's keynote, I'm going to jump back up here and we're going to bring the panelists back up as well as Rob for a Q&A. So without further ado, Rob Sher.
Great. Thank you, Tony. So my question was, what does innovation mean for you, your company, and your industry? And back in September, I started off in a journey to get an answer to that question from 20 Bay Area food and beverage CEOs and their executives. But when you do that, you can't just listen, right? It's really exciting because you get in 20 different environments. And if you only use your ears, you only get just a little piece of it, right? So when you're walking in the office, you're looking around, you're looking at the facial expressions, right, and the body language, and you're really paying attention to what they say first and what they say last, right? And I remember in Galaxy Desserts, right in the middle of our interview, I had both the CEO and the chef, both partners there, and what had to be the world's largest baking sheet comes in with somebody carrying it, right? And there's all these treats on it. And that just dropped down. It just said, "Hello, we're in a production facility." I've never seen a baking sheet that big. Kind of tilted it through the doorway. There was another interview in a gorgeous office. I mean, we walked in and we were surrounded by original art. There was a sculpture on statues, right? On statuary, and then there was a conference room table that was art in itself. Just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. There was another one, a very valuable interview, where I was seated on a broken chair that just screeched every time I wiggled, right? And the CEO was sitting on a fourth-hand couch, right? And there was no conference table, I think, anywhere in the entire facility. You absorb and you drink in all those things. But when I sat down with Helen Russell, the CEO of Equator Coffee and Tea, we sat down at the coffee tasting table. I didn't know there was such a thing. It's like a Lazy Susan, and it's got little cup holders on it, right? And it was in a small room that serves as their training facility for their coffee retailers, right? So over on my left, there was all this coffee apparatus and all that. And I asked my question, right? What does innovation mean to you, your company, and your industry? And we started digging into it 5-6 minutes in. And then a young man pops in, and he starts fooling with all of the coffee equipment. And before I know it, I lose control of the interview. And we're all talking about this new coffee, and it was roasted in a different way, and so on. And then before I realize they're talking about socks, right? And they see this really puzzled look on my face because I'm not a coffee expert, right? And so they explain, well, there's coffee socks, you see, because in the olden days, the cowboys, they didn't carry coffee filters. I should have known that. I'd never seen that on the TV shows. And so they would put the grounds in the sock, right? And they'd make their coffee that way with the sock. But I see some like, ew, looks. The socks at Equator Coffee and Tea were special socks, and they had to show me that. So then the equipment came off onto the coffee tasting table, and see, it's a special sock and a special sock-making coffee thing. And then before you know it, the table's spinning, right? And we're tasting coffee now. And finally, we get off that tangent and back onto the subject of innovation. And I learned that they made a key strategic choice about a year plus ago to buy a coffee farm in Panama. They bought the farm. They actually bought the farm. And so, being the business guy I am, I said, well, so how did you calculate the expected ROI on that strategic choice? And how did you compare, that option to all of the other strategic options available to you, right, with the same dollars and so on and so forth? And I started to get a few answers, but I kind of had to poke a little bit harder to try to dig into those answers. And right when I was kind of getting to the crux of it, right? I'm nice when I interview, but I was working. A woman pops in and has a kind of a whispered consultation with Helen. And I was trying not to look like I was listening, but I was trying to listen. And all I kind of heard was, yes, let's buy him. I was like, okay. And so then she turned to me and she said, I never thought in all my days when I signed up to be a CEO that I would be making a decision to buy a burro, a donkey, a mule in Panama. And then she had to explain, right? And it was a story about a damsel in distress. See, so they bought this farm. And when you buy a farm in Panama, a coffee farm, it comes with people living on it, right? And so there's families that live it and work the farm. And there was one daughter, a little girl named Angelica, who was born with a bad leg. Yet when Helen and her business partner Brooke bought it, they couldn't just keep running the farm knowing that this girl had an unusable leg that could be repaired. I mean, how can you do that, right? And so they paid to send her back to America, where they paid for the surgeries to be done on the leg. And as soon as she was ready to get on that plane and go back, they did that. And it was the very day that I was interviewing Helen, when little Angelica got to the bottom of the mountain, where there's a 2-mile path that on good days is a road that leads up to her home on the coffee farm. But it wasn't passable that day. And in fact, if you want to look at that road, go to their website. On a good day, they strapped a camera to the front, a video cam to the front of a bumper of a Jeep, right? So you can actually watch that road going all the way up. Little Angelica could not make it up. And hence, they bought the burro so she could ride back home and be with her family that day. And as that distraction wound down, I just couldn't bring myself back to asking the business school kinds of questions. What's the ROI on that purchase, and how much money might you have made if you did something else? I just couldn't. Because these innovators are on a quest. It's not about business as usual. They're on a quest. And it's a quest with all the passion and conviction of a knight pursuing the Holy Grail, right? That's the mother of all quests. A knight pursuing the Holy Grail. Keep that in your mind as I continue on with my talk. Now, I had the term quest professionally defined for me. My son's was going into the freshman year last summer, and he was assigned a book to read ahead of time called How to Read a Book Like a Professor by none other than Professor Thomas Foster. And Foster tells us that there are 5 essential elements to every quest. 5 essential elements. The first one, of course, is a knight, or more broadly, a quester. And in this case, it's Helen and Brooke, right? They're passionate. They're fighting to succeed at their quest. They're courageous. They're risk-taking. The second essential element, according to Professor Foster, is there has to be a place to go, right? Knight going on a quest, knight has to go somewhere. And in this case, it's coffee farming, or maybe full vertical integration, right? From ground all the way through to the finished coffee product. But the third essential element to a quest is there has to be a stated reason for going, right? A specific reason. That makes sense. And in this case, what Helen told me, it was to control all the variables that affect coffee, right? I mean, they're at the kind of high-end, premier end of the coffee market, so they wanted to control all the variables. But Professor Foster tells us there's also always a fourth element, which is a real reason for a quest. The stated reason and the real reason aren't the same. And I didn't think, it did not quite come to me right in that interview to ask Helen what that was. But I can tell you from having sat with her for a couple hours, the real reason is that she and her partner just want to experience the richest form of authenticity in the coffee production cycle. That means something to them. And they felt like if they were just buying beans and roasting and selling, they weren't real, they weren't fully authentic. That's the real reason they went on this quest. And then, of course, the fifth essential element, according to Professor Foster, is challenges and trials en route. So we've already had a damsel in distress, right? It takes 4 to 5 years before coffee trees actually bear usable beans. And there was no reasonable housing for the workers on that farm. They're having to rebuild all of that, and it goes on and on. Now, as you think about a quest, when we tie it together with innovation in business, right? It could be that the entire company is on a quest. I interviewed a few of those folks where the entire company is a quest. But it could also be just a business unit, right? You're bolting on a whole new area for the company. That could serve as a quest as well. Or it might be just a new product or new service. That can be a quest, right? There's quests at different levels.